We are Group 8 presenting on our project investigating Achilles tendinopathy. I am here with myself, Ashley Watts, and I'll let my other colleagues introduce themselves.
Hello, my name is Garrett Evans.
And good evening. My name is Henry Penagos.
The article we selected is titled Isometric Exercises Do Not Provide Immediate Pain Relief in Achilles Tendinopathy, a quasi-randomized clinical trial. So a little summary of what the article is about. The purpose of the researchers' investigation was to study whether isometric exercises provide immediate pain relief in patients suffering from chronic mid-portion Achilles tendinopathy. The study design was a quasi-randomized controlled trial. The results were it was determined that there was no significant reduction in pain following the isometric exercise protocol.
So, based on the results that we found, there was 11 items that were utilized for the PEDro scale. My colleague Ashley Watts said, it was a clinical trial that was published in 2020 in PubMed. Based on the items here on the eligibility criteria, it was marked as yes. Random allocation for this study was followed by no. Number 3, concealed allocation was also not found. Baseline comparability was also no. Blinding of subjects, blinding of therapists, and blinding of assessors were also not present. There was adequate follow-up, but there was no intention to treat analysis. Between group comparisons were also not were found, as well as point measures and variability were found too. So in total, it was a score of 3 with 7 flaws that we found.
Okay, and then the 7 flaws that we found based on the PEDro scale are further explained here in this chart. As you can see, each one described based on how the flaw occurred. Random allocation and concealed allocation due to the study design of quasi-randomization makes for unable to blind the participants of the study. So they knew what group they were getting placed into when they began the study. And then there was no objective measures used for baseline comparability at the beginning of the study, just to compare objectively each of them in their Achilles tendinopathy. And there was only subjective data about pain mainly that was gathered. And then in terms of blinding of subjects, therapists, and assessors, because they all knew who was in what group, it made for inaccurate blinding of all of those participants of the study. And then the intention to treat analysis, because of the study was only looking into subjective pain levels and there was no objective measurements gathered, there was no intention to treat these Achilles tendinopathies in the study.
So let's get into the strengths and weaknesses outside of the PEDro scale that we noticed within this article. So we'll start with the weaknesses. For one, the primary aim was to determine immediate effects of isometric exercise. Along with it only collecting subjective data, finding immediate effects is sort of difficult to do as measurable data. Patients were instructed to ignore pain unless it was unbearable. That sort of goes on the path of, is this ethical? Should we be telling patients to ignore pain until it's at an unbearable level? Another weakness was they failed to investigate eccentric exercises. Eccentric exercises is a researched, proven intervention for Achilles tendinopathy. While they were investigating something new, we were curious to why it wasn't a comparison. Another weakness was inclusion criteria of absence of symptomatic improvement after exercise. This is a weakness because it's difficult to generalize to other patient populations. Now let's get into the strengths. For one, the instructions given to the patients for the intervention was given by one individual who was a PhD candidate with 2 years of medical training. So we hope to believe that this single individual gave the same instructions with proper terminology. Another strength was that the patients provided written consent. This is a strength because we have the patient's approval. They're aware that there is no intention to treat and that they're being involved in the study. Another strength is the protocol was approved by the Medical Ethical Committee. And another strength we saw was that the aim of the study was unknown to the participants. So although we talked about they weren't technically blinded because they knew what intervention group they were in, they did not know that the researchers were investigating the immediate effects of isometric exercises. So there's some strengths and some weaknesses that should definitely be discussed.
So there were many components that we could have used that are meaningful to PTs, but I wanted to focus on a couple here. For example, there was one component that was the non-blinding of subjects in the respective groups. We think that's something meaningful to us as clinicians because if the patients already know or the participants already knew what group they were going in, they were going to probably have a different perspective, whether it was positive or negative, leading up to that intervention within the group, thus skewing the data subjectively. So we thrive on the successes of the intervention at the objective level more so than the subjective. So that leads to the two more components that we saw that go hand in hand. So it was the baseline comparability and the intention tree analysis. So it focuses on a lot on the subjective, on the self-reporting of pain for patients with Achilles tendinopathy, rather than treating the resolved issue. So as clinicians, we think that we know pain levels are important as a baseline to track with each session, but it's even more important and more vital to be able to treat the impairment and dysfunction in itself, which would then be able to reduce pain as a secondary impairment.
Okay, and this next chart here that you're seeing currently is our new proposed study design. This chart aims to improve the PEDro score from 3 to an 8. And based on this, we would correct the following criteria. And as you can see here, blinding of therapist and intention to treat analysis are not as easily improvable as the others. Just due to the nature of the study, the therapists that are treating these patients in the study, and the nature of the study being to measure pain levels subjectively instead of actually treating the Achilles tendinopathies. And in terms of allocation, randomly and concealed, both of those can be improved just by allocating the patients to the groups randomly instead of using an inclusion number. And then also just concealing this allocation to the patients so they don't know who is in which group. And baseline comparability can be improved just by using a subjective scale like the Visa A scale, for example, to measure objectively each one of them's Achilles tendinopathy at initial baseline. And then the blinding of the subjects can be improved just based on the allocation being more random and more blinded in that sense. Blinding of assessors can be improved just based on the groups and just blinding of the information of the different groups to the treatment so they don't really know who was in what group. They're just assessing them post study. And these are references listed here. Thank you for viewing and thank you for watching.